In this video, we're going to talk about section 1.2, which is operations in integers, operations between integers. And by operations, what I mean is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers. All right, we want to be able to do that with integers. Let's start with adding. What you have to do when you're dealing with adding integers is determine their signs. When you're adding integers with the same sign, we're in this case right here, we're going to add the numbers and keep their signs. Add the numbers and keep their signs. With integers with different signs, we're going to find the difference. Remember, difference means subtract. So we subtract the absolute values of the number, or find the difference between the absolute values of the two numbers that we have, and keep the sign of the number that had the largest absolute value. Let's see this in action. We're going to look at these two examples here. In part A, I have -5 plus -2. All right. Notice that they both have the same sign, right? And so if I want to add these two things together, I'm going to look at the absolute value of -5, which is 5, and the absolute value of -2, which is 2. 5 plus 2 is 7. And so my solution is going to have a numerical value of 7, but I got to figure out what the sign is going to be. Well, since they both started out being negative here, then I've got to keep that same sign that they have. So my solution is going to be -7. All right. Let's go to part B. We have 2 plus a -6. Now, if I want to add these two numbers together, notice that 2 is positive and 6 is negative. And so they have different signs. And so if I think about it, what those rules on the last page say, then I need to take the absolute value of 2 and the absolute value of 6 and find their difference. Well, 6 is bigger, so normally when we subtract, we do 6 minus 2, and 6 minus 2 is 4. Now I got to worry about my signs. Well, absolute value of 2 is 2, and absolute value of -6 is a +6. So -6 has the larger absolute value. That means that my sign on this 4 should be negative. So my solution here should be -4. All right. Now, I do want to let you know that this is one way to think about finding a subtraction or doing an addition when your signs are different. Right. So this solution would be -4. You subtract the two numbers, so you don't think about their signs, just subtract them. 6 minus 2 is 4, and then you take the sign of the one that at least looks larger, at least when you're looking at absolute value. All right. And so that's adding integers. Now let's go to subtracting integers. When we subtract integers, we add the opposite, all right? So subtraction is the exact same thing as adding the opposite. So what we can do is we can change subtraction to addition, but when we do that, we have to do the opposite sign, all right? I have 2 minus a -6. Well, I'm going to keep my 2, and since this is a subtraction, I can change it to addition and add the opposite. The opposite of -6 is a +6. So this is going to be 2 plus 6, which is 8. So we get 2 plus 6, which is 8. Let's go to -4 minus a -8. Again, since I see that subtraction or that minus sign, for me to simplify this, all right, I'm going to keep my -4 the same. But if I change subtraction to addition, I've got to do the opposite of -8, which is a +8. All right, so now this is -4 plus -8. Notice that a -4 is a negative, and I have a +8. I subtract them, and I get 4. And you keep the sign of the one that looks larger in absolute value, which is this 8 right here. So it'll be a +4 as our solution. Okay. Now let's get to multiplying and dividing integers. All right, one way to think about multiplying and dividing is just repeated addition if you're talking about multiplication, and it's repeated subtraction if you're talking about division. All right, both of these are going to follow the same stuff, the same arithmetic that was used when you were multiplying and dividing regular numbers. The only difference here is that we've got to worry about signs again. All right, so there's two things you have to remember. If the signs are the same, meaning both positive numbers or both negative numbers, then the product will be positive. So the signs are the same and you're multiplying and dividing, your product or your quotient will be positive. If the signs are different, then the product will be negative. So if you have a positive times a negative or a positive divided by a negative and vice versa, then what's going to happen is that your sign of your solution is going to be negative. Okay? And so we're going to look at these 4 examples here. In part A, I have 9 times negative 6. Notice we already know what 9 times 6 is from our multiplication tables. It is 54, but now we've got to worry about the sign. Well, since 9 is positive and 6 is negative, the signs are different. And so when the signs are different, our product will be negative. So we get a negative 54 as our solution. All right, let's go to part B. I have a negative 4 times negative 13. Well, the signs are the same. And so my product is going to be positive. And so I have to figure out what 13 times 4 is. And 13 times 4 is 52. So our solution here should be a positive 52. Let's go to part C. I have a negative 57 divided by a negative 7. Notice the signs are the same. So when I divide, my result is going to be a positive. And 56 divided by 7 is the same thing as 8. So I get a positive 8 as my solution. Last but not least, part D, we have a negative 48 divided by a 3. Notice that 48 is negative, that 3 is positive, so I know that my result will be negative. And 3 goes into 48 16 times, and so my solution will be negative 16. All right, with multiplication and division, there is always a way to check yourself, right? So since this is negative 48 divided by 3, notice that if I multiply the 3 and the negative 16, my result is that negative 48 there. Same thing happens here. Since I've got negative 56 divided by negative 7 equals 8, if I multiply the negative 7 and the 8, I do get the negative 56. So that's one way to check yourself. In addition, we can do the same thing with the multiplication problems. If we want to check ourselves, I will take negative 13 and divide that into the 52. So divide negative 13 into negative 52, and you'll see that your solution is going to be a negative 4. And the same thing happens with that negative 6. If you divide negative 6, all right, I'm going to divide it into negative 54, and what you'll see is that your result is going to be that positive 9. All right, and so this concludes multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting your integers.